ball became alive. Skip to my Lou. Skip to my Lou. They all up on the top. Looking. They on the fences. Looking. Want to be Skip. Want to be like Skip.
He's not a player that was ever going to find himself in the best point guard conversation during his time in the league, but he was a top prospect as a teenager who took an unlikely route to Division I basketball. His potential and talent was undeniable, and it got him drafted into the league, but his work ethic kept him in the league for a decade. But it's not his NBA career that's so special, it's the fact he put together a legitimate career as a starting point guard when he was best known as a street baller. He is widely regarded as the inspiration for the AND1 mixtapes that kicked off worldwide tours, video games, and a legitimate basketball alternative for players who didn't have the talent or resources to reach the NBA. The skip tape was legendary, and it showed someone that truly loved the game and could be so creative with the ball. He obviously couldn't play like this in the NBA, but he would sprinkle it in whenever he could. And even though he lacked sound fundamentals and really struggled with his efficiency, he was still a favorite of a new generation, as he played the game differently than anyone before him. But he would still adjust his game as much as he could to be effective in the NBA, as he could pass, steal, and was a very good three-point shooter. But again, when talking about Skip to my Lou, it's not as much about his game-to-game impact, it's about his impact on the game. And that's why he's the focus of today's episode. Let's jog your memory. A Queens native, Rafer Alston attended Cardozo High School. A 1994 New York Times article gives a brief overview of the chaotic childhood that Alston would go through, especially during his teen years. But he would always find solace on the basketball court. High school started well for Alston. As a sophomore, he'd average over 23 points per game and was better than everyone else. But he reportedly had a temper and would also play worse with his parents in the stands. But by the time his junior year hit, he had all but given up on school. He would often sleep through the morning or be absent altogether, and this may have been a way to rebel against his parents, as his dad struggled with addiction, causing a fallout between him and Rafer. But when Rafer's mom wouldn't kick his dad out, he would grow to resent her too. So he would play dice all hours of the night, then sleep through the day. He would play 6 games of his junior season, where he would average 33 points per game in just 17 minutes a night. Nonetheless, going into his senior year of high school, Rafer's name was in the conversation with the other great high school guards in New York, like Stephon Marbury and Felipe Lopez, and Alston was determined to prove he was the best. But this wouldn't last long after Alston only enrolled in 4 classes when he needed 5 to be eligible to play, which led to him being ineligible for his senior year. However, before this ruling was made, he had played in 4 games, where he would average about 30 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds in less than 20 minutes per game. So Alston wouldn't be playing D1 basketball anytime soon, but he would spend his summer playing at the legendary Rucker Park, where in 1994, at the age of 18, he received the nickname of Skip to my Lou. And he was good, really good. And a lot of people didn't believe what they were hearing. So his coach started filming the games, which turned out to be more important than anyone would have thought. But we'll get to that a little later. Alston would work his way into a spot at Ventura Community College, where first and foremost, he would take his academics seriously. But he would also play for the basketball team. And with Alston running the point, Ventura went 37-1 and won the state championship, as Alston was named the tournament MVP. And at this point, Alston was being heavily recruited by Fresno State head coach Jerry Tarkanian, so he continued getting his academics in order. He would transfer to Fresno Community College, but would have to sit out his sophomore season. He was eligible to suit up for the team going into the 97 season, and he would help them reach the state semifinals. But now, going into his junior year, he had finally made it to the big stage that is Division I basketball. Alston would be one of the most exciting yet unknown recruits this season, and would join a Bulldogs team featuring another point guard who had his own struggles, in Chris Herron. But together, along with future NBA players Terrence Roberson and Tremaine Fowlkes, the fast-paced Bulldogs would feature the 15th highest scoring offense in the nation. And coaches had nothing but good things to say about Alston, as his former and current coach would praise him for his leadership and his work ethic. Alston would be one of 5 full-time players on the team to average double figures and would lead the team in steals. But where he set himself apart was through his passing, as he firmly led the team with nearly 7.5 assists per game, and was known for making these passes with the added flair that came from his time playing on the playgrounds in New York. The Bulldogs would go 21-13, and they would make it to the semifinals of the conference tournament, but would lose to Tarkanian's former team in UNLV. They wouldn't get a berth in the NCAA tournament, but would play in the NIT, where they would lose to eventual champion Minnesota in the semifinal. But the Bulldogs' good season was completely overshadowed by a variety of legal issues, and Alston would be one of the people in trouble with the law. During the season, Alston was charged and convicted of assault after attacking his girlfriend and neighbors. He would be given probation in order to take anger management, but he would continually fail to complete the anger management and would in turn spend time in jail. Additionally, Alston would be suspended from the team for these violations, and along with academic issues, his future at Fresno State was in jeopardy, so he would declare for the '98 NBA draft. Although he had a bad label attached to him, the Milwaukee Bucks couldn't pass up his potential and would select him in the second round, 39th overall. Alston would not see an NBA court this season, as he spent the year in the developmental league with the Idaho Stampede, where he would put up about 8 points and 6 assists in 27 games. But something else happened late in 1998 that would change basketball forever, and although Alston was mostly unaware of it, he would be at the forefront. Going back to his time in New York, playing at Rucker Park and other playgrounds, his high school coach Ron Niclario had been recording some of these games, and the never-before-seen moves that Alston was pulling out. And eventually he would compile the best clips on a tape, accompanied by hip-hop music in the background. And as AND1's website says, the tape was hot and circulating, and they would eventually get their hands on it and reprint 50,000 copies to distribute them across the country. And what would simply become known as the skip tape began a movement that would take over the 2000s. And this tape would lead to Alston being signed by AND1 and probably be the most influential player to the AND1 brand of all time. So the skip tape was the blueprint for the AND1 mixtape era, a collection of streetball compilations which took the world by storm, wowed fans, and gave basketball players who may or may not have the skill or resources to play professionally another way to make a legitimate living off of basketball. As a collection of grainy clips of a teenage Rafer Alston would turn AND1 into one of the top basketball brands in the world for the next decade, leading to worldwide tours and even video games. So Rafer Alston had indirectly changed a lot of lives, and his own life would change going into his second season, as he would earn a place on the Bucks' final roster. And even though it would still be a few more years until Alston truly got a chance, he was already showing that there's more ways than people think to get to the NBA. The Bucks had their core in place, with the high-scoring trio of Glenn Robinson, Sam Cassell, and Ray Allen, as Alston would be deep on the bench, only appearing in 27 games this year. He would get less than 14 minutes per game, but his per-game assist averages would be the third highest on the team, behind only Cassell and Allen. The Bucks were on the come-up and would go 42-40 and enter the playoffs as the 8th seed, where they would take the top-seeded Pacers 5 games, but ultimately lose the series. And although Alston had very limited minutes, he would still appear in 4 games. But for the regular season, Alston averaged about 2 points, 2.5 assists, and half a steal per game. The 0-1 season would be the best for this era of Bucks basketball. However, Alston would continue in a limited role, and although he would appear in 37 games and even start 2 of them, his minutes dropped to below 8 per game. However, this wasn't as much a reflection of Alston's play as it was due to the Bucks having acquired a capable veteran point guard in Lindsey Hunter, who would serve as Cassell's backup. Alston's numbers had dropped, but his passing continued to be a strong point, as his per 36 saw him averaging 8.5 assists per game, and he would put up 8 assists on 3 separate occasions while having his first double-figure game when he had 12 points versus Portland on November 22nd. The Bucks would improve to 52-30 and proceed to go on a great playoff run, yet Alston would again barely see the court. The first round would see the Bucks defeat the Tracy McGrady-led Orlando Magic in 4 games, with Alston getting less than 30 seconds of playing time in Game 1. The second round brought the Hornets, who the Bucks would defeat in 7 games. However, Alston would not play the entire series. Then the conference finals brought league MVP Allen Iverson and the 76ers. Alston would briefly see the court in the first 2 and last 2 games of this series, but they would ultimately lose in 7 games. And for the regular season, Alston would put up about 2 points, 2 assists, and half a steal per game. The Bucks had brought in All-Star Anthony Mason in the offseason, but this would be a dysfunctional year for the Bucks, which saw them struggle to a 41-41 record and miss the playoffs altogether. Hunter was gone, so Alston saw a bit of an uptick, as he appeared in 50 games while starting 7 of them, as his minutes had gone up to 12 per game, and he would again have great per 36 numbers. And he didn't waste any opportunities, as he would record 7 games in double figures, and would even record his first career double-double, after putting up 14 points and 10 assists in a November 17th win versus Utah. But with the Bucks imploding and Alston's contract up, this would be his last year wearing a Bucks uniform. And for the regular season, he put up about 3.5 points, 3 assists, and a steal per game. Alston would sign with the Golden State Warriors in the offseason, but they would cut him loose before the season started, and to keep his NBA career alive, he would turn down overseas offers to instead return to the D-League with the Mobile Revelers. And after 6 games for the Revelers, the Raptors would sign him, as he would put up 17 points and 3 steals in his first game with the team on January 10th. The Raptors featured superstar Vince Carter, but he would be limited to just 43 games this year with a variety of injuries. Alston would finally get a good opportunity, as he would receive over 20 minutes per game and finish second on the team in assists, as he would record one double-double and would also have 2 games scoring at least 20 points. But this is where it was more clear that he could be a liability due to his poor shooting, as he would only shoot 41.5% this year. But what was worse is that this would be a career high. The Raptors would struggle without Carter, going 24-58 and missing the playoffs. And for the regular season, Alston averaged about 8 points, 4 assists, and a steal per game. The Raptors chose not to re-sign Alston, and he would sign a 1-year deal with Miami going into 2004. So a 27-year-old Alston would join veterans Eddie Jones and Brian Grant, as well as an influx of young talent in guys like Lamar Odom, Caron Butler, and their new rookie shooting guard, Dwayne Wade. Alston's work ethic continued to shine through, as he would be an integral part of the team, playing in all 82 games and starting 28 of them, and receiving over 31 minutes per game. Alston would be one of 4 players on the team to average double figures, while finishing tied for the team lead in assists and steals, as his 1.4 steals per game would place him in the top 20 in the NBA. His overall shooting was bad, at less than 38%, but he would spend his career as a reliable 3-point shooter, as after shooting a career-high 39.2% from deep last year, he would shoot over 37% this year, on nearly twice as many attempts, and his 161 made threes would be 8th in the league. He would have double figures in 44 games and at least 7 assists in 20 games, as the Heat would go 42-40 to get a playoff matchup with the Hornets. Alston would start strong with 13 points on 50% shooting in a Game 1 win, but he would play terribly the rest of the way, as he never again shot above 38% and dished out a total of 10 assists across the 7-game series coming off the bench. But the Heat would advance and play the Pacers in the second round, and although they would push the Pacers to 6 games, they would be defeated. Alston again started strong, with 17 points and 4 assists on 50% shooting in Game 1, then would crack double figures just one more time and go 0 for 6 from the field in the final 2 games of the series. But for the regular season, Alston would put up about 10 points, 4.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Alston was again a free agent, but he would return to Toronto on a multi-year contract going into the 05 season. Carter was still there, but it appeared his days were numbered, but the Raptors did have their man of the future in a second-year Chris Bosh, and Alston continued to be given more responsibility, as in his 6th season, he would earn a starting spot and have the best individual season of his career. Carter would play just 20 games for the team before being traded to New Jersey on December 17th for a package of picks and players, with the headlining player, Alonzo Mourning, refusing to report to the team. But Alston would also cause the Raptors some headaches around the same time, as he had threatened to quit the team in early December and would be suspended for walking out of practice in late January. But with Carter gone, Alston would see himself become the team's 3rd leading scorer on a career-high average and the leading assist and steal man, while shooting over 40% for the last time in his career. Alston would find himself ranked in the top 20 in steals, assists, and made threes this year. He would hit double figures in 67 games while recording 12 games with at least 10 assists, including a career-high 15 dimes in a January 17th win versus Minnesota. But after the way the Carter trade turned out, the Raptors were only able to manage a 33-49 record, which would not get them in the playoffs. And for the regular season, Alston would average about 14 points, 6.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Alston would be on another new team going into 2006. However, this time it was due to a trade, as he had been shipped to the Houston Rockets, featuring the second year of their Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady duo. But injuries would destroy the Rockets and ruin any chance they had at a good year. Alston remained a starter in Houston, as he would finish as the team's 3rd best scorer behind their elite duo, while leading the team in assists and steals on career-high averages, and his 6.7 assists per game would be 10th in the league. However, Alston would miss 19 games this year, yet his 63 games would be the most played out of him, Yao, and McGrady, as injuries would limit Yao to just 57 games, while McGrady would only manage 47. This season was definitely a disappointment, and Alston's efficiency had dropped significantly, but he would still record 6 double-doubles this year, while recording 12 games with double-digit assists. The Rockets had a top 5 defense, yet bottom 2 offense, and would get off to a terrible start at 3-11. And with all their injuries, they'd never be able to recover, as they would finish the year at 34-48 and miss the playoffs. But for the regular season, Alston would put up about 12 points, a career-high 4 rebounds, 6.7 assists, and 1.6 steals per game. For the first time since 2001, Alston would begin the 07 season with the same team he ended the previous year with. The Rockets had acquired Shane Battier from Memphis to further improve their defense and give them some added depth in case of injury. Luckily for Houston, McGrady would be relatively healthy, playing 71 games this year and finishing as a top 10 scorer in the league. But a serious knee injury right before Christmas would keep Yao out until early March, as he would only play 48 games this year, but he was great when he did play. Alston would again be the team's third leading scorer while leading the team in steals, but he would drop to second in assists. However, he would play and start in all 82 games this year. He would finish in the top 15 in steals per game, and his career-high 192 made threes would be the fourth most in the league. He would hit double figures in 10 games, but have just 3 double-doubles. However, he would record a career-high 9 steals in a February 10th win versus Charlotte. And with the addition of Battier and at least one of their stars healthy, the Rockets got back to winning, as they would finish 52-30, and Alston would make a return to the playoffs to play the Utah Jazz. Alston seemed to love Game 1s, as although he would have just 9 points on 3 of 11 shooting in Game 1, he would also have 11 rebounds and 8 assists. And even though his shooting percentage was low, his all-around play was quite impressive this series. The Rockets would unfortunately lose in 7 games, but in over 44 minutes per game, Alston would be the team's third leading scorer, second leading rebounder and passer, while leading the team with almost 2 steals per game. And his regular season would see him average about 13.5 points, 8.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. The 2008 Rockets featured a new coach in Rick Adelman, and Alston would still retain his starting spot. But little did Houston fans know, their team would make history this year. Alston would again be the team's third leading scorer and second leading assist man, while leading the team in steals. Yao and McGrady would both miss time, as Yao missed 27 games and McGrady missed 16. The Rockets had an okay start, and about halfway through the season, they were sitting at 24-20, going into a January 29th game versus Golden State, which they'd win. And the next time they'd lose, they'd be the top team in the West, as this kicked off the legendary 22-game win streak, as by the time it came to an end in mid-March, the Rockets were 46-20. However, after the 12th win, the Rockets got bad news, as they had lost Yao for the season with a broken foot. And while they easily could have rolled over, they rattled off another 10 wins before falling to Boston on March 18th. And although Alston was a huge part of the entire win streak, they wouldn't get that final win without him. In the 22nd win versus the Lakers, Alston would record a game-high and career-high 31 points to go along with 5 assists on a career-high 8 three-pointers, as the Rockets would win by 12. The Rockets would really cool off the rest of the way, as they would end the year at 9-7 to put their overall record at 55-27, which would still be more than enough for a playoff berth, where they would get a rematch with Utah. But this series would also end in a loss, this time in only 6 games. Alston had pulled his hamstring near the end of the year and would miss the first 2 games of the series, which were both Jazz wins. But when he came back, he would have one of the best series of his career, as in the 4 games he played, he had at least 14 points and 5 assists in 3 of them, and would shoot nearly 44% from the field and 44% from deep. But his regular season would see him average about 13 points, 5.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Alston remained a Rocket going into the 09 season, and for the most part was putting up his usual numbers. But on February 19th, he would be traded, yet he would find himself in the best situation of his career. The Orlando Magic traded for Alston to try and make up for the loss of Jameer Nelson to a torn labrum, which was thought to have likely ended his year. At the time of the trade, they were sitting at 39-13 and didn't want to lose any ground in what looked like a season which they had a legitimate chance to make some noise. Alston would join superstar center Dwight Howard, who would win his first of 3 straight Defensive Player of the Year awards this year, as well as all-star forward Rashard Lewis. Alston would become the team starter and would be playing under Stan Van Gundy, who had been his coach during his season in Miami. With Alston running the point, the Magic would go 20-10 the rest of the way and finish at 59-23, where they would get a first-round matchup versus Philadelphia. Alston would play another great series, as he would be the team's third leading scorer and top distributor on nearly 44% from the field and 40% from deep, as he would hit double figures in every game, including 21 points and 10 assists on 50% shooting in the series-clinching Game 6. Alston looked like a different player in Round 2 versus Boston, as in the first 2 games, he would score a combined 15 points on 6 of 22 shooting, but would still average 6 assists. The Magic had won Game 1, but would lose Game 2, and in the third quarter of this game, Alston would slap Eddie House in the back of the head. Although Alston would say that this was just a retaliation for an earlier elbow from House, he would still be suspended for Game 3, yet the Magic would win. But then they would lose Game 4, as Alston again struggled with 5 points on 1 of 7 shooting, but he would get out of his funk for the rest of the series as he averaged 14 points and nearly 3 steals per game, as the Magic were able to defeat the defending champions in 7 games. However, the Celtics had been without Kevin Garnett. The conference finals brought league MVP LeBron James and the Cavs, and the storyline all year had been that fans were finally going to get a Kobe versus LeBron finals, but the Magic would have other ideas. Alston would start with 11 points and 8 assists in a Game 1 win, but would then play terribly in a 1-point Game 2 loss. His next 2 games would be the best of the postseason, as he had 18 points and 3 steals in a Game 3 win, then a postseason career high of 26, while hitting 6 3-pointers in a Game 4 win. He would go 1 of 10 in Game 5, but then a 13-point effort would help the Magic capture the Eastern Conference crown and advance to the finals, where Kobe Bryant would be waiting for them. By making it this far, Nelson had time to recover and was back for the series. Alston would remain the starter, and Nelson would struggle in his return, but unfortunately so would Alston for the most part. He would shoot 2 of 9 for 6 points in a Game 1 loss, then 1 of 8 for 4 points in a Game 2 loss. He would redeem himself with 20 points on 8 of 12 shooting in a Game 3 win, but then the Magic would lose the next 2 games and the series, as Alston averaged 11.5 points, and for the regular season, Alston would put up about 11.5 points, 5.5 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. Even though Alston had his struggles, he was still solid for the Magic, but with Nelson as the clear-cut starter going into 2010, Alston was traded to New Jersey on draft day. He would record his first career triple-double on November 13th versus Orlando, but overall he was having an up-and-down season, and after 27 games with New Jersey, he was released on January 5th and would sign with the Heat a couple days later. But this would be the end of the line for Alston. He was the team starter, but he was playing very poorly, and he would be benched after the first quarter of a March 2nd game versus Golden State. And after being informed Carlos Arroyo would be starting over him for the rest of the year, Alston cut off contact with the team and was reported to be mulling retirement. He would be suspended indefinitely, and his year was over. But for the regular season, Alston averaged about 8 points, 3.5 assists, and a steal per game. Alston would have brief stints in China and in the D-League after this, but by 2012, his career was over. Rafer Alston was never a star in the NBA, and definitely had his own attitude problems. But when he was young, he developed a reputation as a street baller. And at the time, street ball had no place in the NBA. But he would change the narrative, and show that as long as you can hoop, you can play. It's true that he is different than some of the big names during the peak AND1 years, as his talent was up there with the legitimate best prospects in the nation. He just had made his path to the NBA a lot harder than it had to be. But he still took a playground game with an absence of fundamentals and turned into a 10-year NBA career. And it wasn't just being on rosters for 10 years. It was being a starting NBA point guard for the majority of those years and even helping take a team to the finals. But the impact he made wasn't on the NBA as much as it was on the game of basketball. He paved a whole new route for players to make a living out of the sport they love, and became one of the most legendary street ballers of all time. And that alone needs to be recognized and respected, because Skip to My Lou inspired a generation. But that's it for today's episode on Rafer Alston. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on one of his Milwaukee teammates, or this one on a player he went to the finals with. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.